Welcome to another edition of One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. Joining me this week, guitar maven Steve Vai, talking about the Tony MacAlpine benefit show taking place in Los Angeles in December. We also talk about his time with David Lee Roth, the importance of the Eat 'Em and Smile album, wanting to play with Alice Cooper, his time with Whitesnake, and more. As far as the benefit goes, there is a GoFundMe.com page for Tony. It is GoFundMe.com slash benefit for Tony. So please head over to that and have a look. On the other side of my Steve interview, I have an interview with Martin Turner, formerly of Wishbone Ash. He has a new album called Written in the Stars. We talk about the album and classic Wishbone Ash albums and more. If you like what you're hearing on the One-on-One with Mitch Lafon podcast and would like to offer a small contribution to help defray some of the costs, I do have a PayPal account. It is mitchminute@aol.com. That is mitchminute@aol.com. But enough of that. Let's get right into the show and to guitarist extraordinaire Steve Vai. Here he is, the one, the only, Steve Vai. We are speaking with Steve Vai. Good day, sir.
Hi.
So we're going to talk first about this benefit for Tony MacAlpine that you're doing. Great of you to be involved. You know, Tony's got colon cancer. What was the idea behind the benefit, or in terms of how did it come together?
Well, I've known Tony for, since the 80s, early 80s. I mean, he was he came onto the scene, and he was just and is a magnificent player. And I enjoyed his music and his records, and I knew he was a great guitar player. I was putting a band together. I can't remember the year. I'm not good at that. But I really wanted to have a great line of guitar players, and but I needed a keyboard player too. So I called Tony, and lucky for me that he was interested, and he could also play keyboards. What I didn't realize was what an accomplished pianist he is, and when he joined the band, I mean, Tony MacAlpine is just one of these extraordinarily natural musicians. Whenever he would pick up the guitar, he would, if I showed him something or if he was playing something, it always absorbed very easily, very intuitively, very instinctively. And musically, music just flowed from him. I remember once we were backstage and there was a piano, and I heard some piano music, and it was this gorgeous classical music, being performed like a completely accomplished, by what sounded like a completely accomplished, inspired musician. And I go back there, and it's Tony, and I just stand there and I'm watching him. I had no idea, and when he stopped, I said, "What was that?" And he said, "Oh, that was Chopin Etude number so and so." I said, "Can you play something else?" He goes, "Which one do you want me to play? I know them all." And this is just a little bit of the breadth of his talent. And besides that, he's just such a great guy to tour with, But the kind of music that Tony makes on his own, there's an audience for it. But musicians like him, they work, and basically, they work, they live, they work, and they live. And then in some situations, unfortunate situations, an event in life occurs, like his wife was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and then this happened to him, and it was sort of some misdiagnoses in the interim. So he went to Spain to, have everything checked out, and that's when they discovered his condition, and they also entered these procedures. And as a result, Tony couldn't work. He can't work, and because he's a working musician, so he was in a tough spot. So many people that he's worked with know him. He's just one of these guys he's lovable, he's wonderful, never a bad word about anybody, incredibly talented, funny, and he needs some help. So everybody is coming together for the show, and I'm really grateful that I have an opportunity to help and support him by participating in the concert. And it's going to be a fantastic concert. I've done benefits before, and there's just a lot of love and a lot of high energy, and it's for a great cause. And there's some monstrous musicians that are going to be taking the stage. It's going to be a great night.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Zach Wilde there, Billy Sheehan. Explain it to me, though. I'm from Canada, and people that listen to this are European and Australian and all that. When somebody has cancer or some kind of ailment here, we go to the hospital, we get treated. There's no need for a benefit. Is that not sort of what goes on in the States?
I think various things go on when people enter into a state like this.
Right.
And they get help in various ways if they need it. Some people have insurance that takes care of it.
Right.
In America, Tony didn't have the insurance that was necessary, I think. Gotcha. I'm not really privy to a lot of the details.
Gotcha.
But, he was a working musician, basically. Right. And, you can't make any money these days on record sales, so you got to go out and tour. And there's little auxiliary kinds of incomes, but I think people seek help based on what their needs are. And then people who are in their circle respond in kind. So we are in Tony's circle, and he's reaching for help. So we're responding in the way that we know how. And it's going to help him get through this because he has months of treatments that are expensive.
Right.
And he has, like everybody, bills to pay, and his wife, who could have expected all this? It's kind of like when it rains, it pours.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, yes, unfortunately. But the fortunate thing is that it's raining and pouring with beautiful support, too.
Yeah, and of course...
It's very interesting. Sorry.
I was just going to say that, and of course, this takes place December 12th at the Wiltern Theater in Los Angeles. It is going to be an incredible event and such a great cause. I mean, taking care of sort of one of our brothers in arms, if you want, is absolutely a fantastic thing that you and Billy and Zach and others are doing. It's going to be great. Absolutely going to be great.
Yeah, I think so. Right? We've done them before, and it's always turned out great. And we get to play.
Yeah, and you were mentioning how much of a great musician he was. I just wonder if we can I wanted to recount a story that I had myself with you. It was at the G3 show in Montreal, and we had been set up with an interview. I was on the bus down in the in the hole, and you had your MacBook or you had a computer open, and as I was talking to you, you were typing away, and I said, wow,
how inconsiderate of me.
Well, no, in fact, it wasn't. I found it quite brilliant because when you were done, you flipped the screen around and you showed me that you had actually done this musical notation. You said, I had a song in my head. I had to get it out. I was always amazed by that because on the screen, all of a sudden, there was all these notes. So I'm just, is that something that you sort of, you just get inspired when you get inspired, and you just have to stop everything else, whether it's an interview or whatever, and just get it down. Is that sort of your process?
Well, I try to. I'm not inspired all the time.
Right.
Maybe geniuses are, but I think we all have little moments of clarity, and when they come to me, usually in my music career, they come as just little ideas. So I then will feverishly rush to try to capture the essence of the inspiration. And sometimes it's a few notes, and maybe it's something I play on the guitar. Maybe it's something that comes from me from the outside. Maybe it's something that just arises. It's the same as everybody, it's
right.
No different really. And then if I can just capture the essence of the inspiration, then it usually later when I go back to it, it's that essence is still there, and I can then, mentally realign with that inspiration and create a song. So when I was typing on the bus, that was my means of capturing that particular inspiration. And probably I was using Finale, which is a music notation program,
right? And
I'm pretty good with it, so I can get my idea out and then put it away and let it sit on the shelf and rot and disappear into digital dust that my kids have to throw out someday.
Yeah, I just
Or
that moment always marked me. I just thought it was incredible because I mean, you actually did the interview at the same time as you were sort of typing with the left hand kind of thing, or right hand, whatever it was, and you sort of you had two brains going on at the same time. I just thought it was spectacular to watch, quite frankly.
well,
Is that always the process for you, though? Is it always straight into musical notation first, or are there times where you just sort of pick up the guitar and say, "All right, I got a riff in my head. Let me go to the actual instrument."
well, it's any means necessary.
Okay.
Sometimes, and usually uh, these days, the iPhone is my favorite tool because I have tons and tons and tons of little snippets of ideas, and sometimes I'll just turn on the recorder and speak an idea,
Okay.
a lyric, or a melody, or I'll say this goes like this, and then go here, and then go there, and then do this thing that I'm visualizing on the guitar that I've never done.
Right.
Do that, and it goes like this, and then I forget about it, and then sometime later, sometimes long time later, I'll hear it and I'll go, oh yes, that riff that I thought of, let me try that, and then that's how you build your vocabulary.
Yep, absolutely. The last album that you released is Stillness in Motion, which is you live in Los Angeles. The last studio album, unless I have it wrong, is Story of the Light, which I guess was 2012.
12, yeah, Story
Yeah.
of Light, yeah.
Where are we in terms of new music? I mean, is it even important at this point to make new music? Can you not just tour and say, "Hey, Steve Vai's in town, you come buy a ticket," or
Well, I could,
right,
but what do you do? You do interviews, and you're a writer, probably, right?
right, of course.
So you don't have to write.
Well,
You can just do interviews,
absolutely,
but you want to write because there's a creative impulse in you.
absolutely, absolutely.
So that's why I like to make records. I like to tour too, but when the creative insights stop, maybe if they stop, I mean, I have enough of those little snippets for
Right.
10 lifetimes. Then I'll stop. But I find myself more and more releasing myself
Okay.
from what I've noticed was a bondage of fantasies, of ideas. There's so many things you like to do that it becomes overwhelming. And then at some point, hang on one second, sorry. You wanted bugs and all. I think the guys are cutting the oak tree outside. Okay. So the phase that I'm going through right now is I'm releasing a lot of old ideas. I'm releasing myself from having to accomplish so many of the impossible, not impossible, but so many of the inspirations that I've had in the past, because they're bringing me to a person in the past, as opposed to saying, okay, well, here I am now. Let's make believe I have no future or past. What's new? What can you do that's new and fresh and interesting? And then when I find that space of freedom, usually I find inspiration that moves me into doing certain things. And it's very liberating. You know what I mean? It's liberating to not have the weight of the need to accomplish. And then it's fun. It's free. It's light. And it's more enjoyable.
Yeah, and to contextualize what I was trying to get to, it's more of the sense that, with the music business as it is, making a record is a huge endeavor. You studio time, and there's cost, and there's this, and there's that. And then you put it out there, and 5,000 people pick it up. 10,000
Yeah,
people.
but that's peripheral.
Right.
When you're if you're in it for that, you can have a big letdown, and you can even be led to believe that you shouldn't do it anymore because nobody cares.
Right.
But really, truly, and that happens quite often. But truly creative people, they don't have a choice. It doesn't matter. On one level, it doesn't matter. On one level, it doesn't matter what the world will think of it. It's a creative impulse, and you have to see it through just because you want to. You want to hear it. You want to feel it. You want to experience the completion of it, and you go through it, and that's the payoff. That's the real payoff. I'm working on music right now,
Right.
and I'm listening to it, and I'm saying, no, nobody's going to get this. No, nobody's going to get it. I get it, and that's what really matters. I really, really get it. Like, this is the best stuff I've ever done. This is, obviously it's the best stuff you've ever done because you're doing it now.
Right.
You know? And that, and then going through the process of it is enjoyable because you enjoy every motion of it. Every idea that comes when you're filling in the grid of the initial inspiration is like a little victory and a little place of, you know? And then when you're done, you listen to it, it's like, wow, Now, if you're going through the process and all you're thinking is, what will people think of me when they hear this? Or how will I fit in? Or how is this going to support me? All these things are important, yes, they're on one level, but they're not of vital importance. They're of secondary importance. The most important thing is that your excitement, your enthusiasm for the idea flows into what you're doing, unbridled, just completely flows without any obstacles of thoughts that have a tendency to take you away from your space, from your note, from your inspiration. But a lot of people, they focus on the concerns and the fears, and then you got to get a record deal, and then you got to get a studio, and you got to pay for all that. All that comes. It just happens when you just stay focused on the inspiration. You find a way. There's nothing that can stop you. And usually, that's what you're going to be most successful at. It's the irony in it all. Usually, there will be a group of people that will be attracted because they see the thing in your work that you were feeling when you were doing it. And that's your best audience because it's your real audience. It's not a superficial audience. It's not a here today, gone later today audience. You know, it's you. It's you. It's who you are creatively. There's nothing better. It could be, you can consider, it's much better than if you can pay your bills or make millions of dollars and all that. And yes, that's better, sure. But really, the personal satisfaction, the completion, the peace, the feeling that you've accomplished your, I use this term very loosely, purpose in life, is satiated a bit. But if you go through the process and you put everybody through hell, you put yourself through hell, and you're not even really making the music that is very natural and organic and inspired to you, but you're pantomiming the genius of somebody else, and you can even have a hit, and you can even make a lot of money and become very popular and famous and wealthy. And that then, what you notice is you take who you are with you.
Right.
So when you get to that point, you're still not happy. There's never enough fame for the ego. There's never enough money or respect or better than the others. There's never enough. So it's a trap.
It is. And
yeah, it is.
You know, I don't know how much longer we have, but I have so many more questions. If I can, Eat 'em and Smile.
Yeah, you can.
Great, thank you. Eat 'em and Smile with David Lee Roth was one of those albums that was sort of the soundtrack of my life. It was phenomenal, and Yankee Rose is probably one of the best songs of that era. I mean, it's an incredible song. You know, God, I go to Van Halen shows now, and I go, come on, just play it once, please.
Come on, your guitar talk.
Yeah. How was that being
you.
in that band? I mean, you've got Billy Sheehan, who's unbelievable. Greg Bissonette, unbelievable. David was doing his own thing at the time. You came out of Alcatraz. You were sort of a known unknown entity, if you know what I mean. I think people who knew Alcatraz, and that changed everything for you. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. Yes, I believe so. Everything changes everything for you. You know, I mean, when I joined Frank's band, that changed everything. When I joined Alcatraz, that changed. You know, everything's always changing everything. Getting into Dave's band, it was a pivotal change because arguably a rock star overnight. You know, and I was very naive and kind of innocent in a way. You know, I loved rock music. I loved the 70s was my meat, so to speak. And then when the 80s came and that whole kind of 80s explosion happened,
right,
boy, I look back and I'm so grateful that I was in that band with those guys doing that thing, and we were just, there was so much freedom, and you could wear crazy, ridiculous clothes, and the stage show was just completely off the hook. The lights, the amount of light cans that we had on the stages in the Guinness Book of World Record at one point, I believe. And, the parties were notorious, and it was just such a wonderful time, and it was freedom, and we played our ass off. You were challenged to play your ass off and raise the bar constantly, wearing the weirdest clothes and the wildest hair and all that stuff. It was a great time. It was really great.
It really was, and it's hard to believe.
And that flowed into Eat 'Em and Smile.
Yeah.
So when you listen to that record, you can feel that time and that, the fashion and the whole thing, and that's one of the things I like when I listen to that record. It kind of takes you back.
Yeah, and it's almost hard for me to believe that next year it'll be the 30th anniversary. I mean, you look back at that and you go, wow, it's hopefully there's something special.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah,
30 years? Are you kidding?
Well, 86 to 2016, right? So it's going to be 30 years old. I'm hoping that there'll be a deluxe edition or some kind of special one-night concert, or you can't just let that disappear.
I can tell you one thing that we're doing.
Okay.
Billy and myself and Greg and Brett Tuggle, who's the keyboard player.
Right.
There's this odd, but it's a bowling alley. It's called Lucky Strike.
I've heard of that.
New kind of bowling alley that's really cool, and people go there. Well, the one here in Hollywood is, I think it's the Hollywood one. It's kind of turned into a Wednesday night rock and roll. So they got a stage, and people come and they jam and all this. So we're going to go there and jam a couple of the Eat 'Em and Smile songs.
Oh, that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm going to put an invite out to Dave, but I don't know what he's doing.
Well, it certainly would be nice for him to show up. But
wouldn't it be great?
That would be fantastic, and of course, YouTube would be thrilled by all the videos. Mm-hmm. When you got into that, though, was it satisfying in the sense that creatively? I mean, you just mentioned that there was a lot of freedom, but was there any record company talk about, hey, it has to sound like Eddie Van Halen, or David Lee Roth says competitively we got to be better than those guys, or was it really total freedom?
Well, I think it was probably different for each guy in the band.
Right.
I know for me, there was, from a third party perspective, it would look as though I had the ghost of Edward Van Halen hanging over my shoulders while I was recording, but it wasn't like that for me. There's so much respect for him and gratitude because of what he's done that has helped me so much to get to where I was. And I knew when I was going to be doing my guitar parts that the last thing I wanted to do or could do was sound like him. That would have been a big mistake because A, I can't, and B, why limit my own potential? So when you talk about was it creative, it was wildly creative. I had to be very creative and innovative. I had to reach down into my most innovative tools to come up with things that I knew people would say, okay, well, this isn't this guy, and it's not that guy, and it's not this guy. But it wasn't even a conscious effort. It just flowed. I could distinctly remember sitting there and like with the Big Trouble solo, and just thinking, what would I do? And it was such an open, free, I was so enthusiastic about what I was going to, I didn't even know what I was going to do. And after I listened to it, I said, holy smokes, that's what I did. And it was great. And as far as record company, Ted Templeman was the producer, and he was very inspired producer. As a matter of fact, you like Yankee Rose.
Yeah.
That intro, the big chord, I had something a little different. Right. It was more like a just a little something. And Ted said, why don't you just just slam that first chord, and that was, and I said, yeah, that feels great. It felt so much better than the little part that I had. So that was the record company aided in the evolution of the creativity. So that was a good situation. And he was like that through the whole project. What do you got, guy? And then if the tone wasn't right, he said, you know what, let's try let's try some other amplifiers, and and then that was a wonderful thing that happened then, because we were in the studio in San Francisco, and I had very little experience with modded amps and Marshall stacks and stuff like that, because I could never afford them. And so I came into the sessions with, my gear, and it just wasn't, a lot of it wasn't cutting it. And lucky for me, Steve Stevens was in the next studio.
Right.
And he's always had an incredible tone. He's a real gearhead. He knows the whole sphere of Marshalls and the big rock tones, so to speak. And he loaned me gear. He gave me one of his best heads and cabinets, and I think I recorded like 2 or 3 songs with him. So, yeah, it was a really wonderful kind of open, creative environment. And although when you listen to my solo music,
right,
which virtually none of it could exist on a David Lee Roth record, one might think, well, you could do all this other stuff and you compose for orchestras and blah, blah, blah. Weren't you confined? But no, not at all, because within the sphere of the guitar and what was being called for me, there was a tremendous opening to be creative.
Yeah, it was incredible album. Hey. And I even like the Spanish version of the album, believe it or not.
Sonrisa Sonora, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, let me just quickly, as an aside, ask you about that Spanish album. Did they just use the tracks and then just have Dave re-sing over it? Or did you actually have to recut everything to fit the sort of Spanish melodies? No, okay.
No, he just redid the vocals.
Okay. After that, Slip of the Tongue, another big album in my life, or at least Whitesnake was. If you can just mention talking about going into that situation, because they came off sort of this career reviving album with the 87 Whitesnake, a lot of expectation from radio, from MTV, from everything. And then, of course, they had to change the band, get some new guys in, including yourself. What was that situation like for you? Happy with the record, not happy with the record, happy with Dave, not good times, or was that just a was it that?
Well, there was a lot of things going on.
Right.
Your life experience is based on your own perspective. And at the time, I was going through a lot of changes. I was a pretty different person. I was around that time, after I left Dave Roth kept our egos in check, in a sense. You know what I mean? Because we were cocooned in that town, so to speak, the Roth town. And it was sort of like, this might not be such a great analogy, but they say, Saddam Hussein kept peace in the Middle East to some point, to some degree. Right. And within my own ego, there was a sort of peace with Dave. But then once I was gone from it, I left that situation. Once you become famous, people treat you differently.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you can start believing and creating an identity for yourself based on all the things that are happening around you. It's very common. So here I was at that point on the cover of every magazine multiple times and winning every award, being retired from all the awards because I was winning too many, and everybody telling you how great you are, and even your heroes, you read interviews and they're like, well, yeah. You start to, for me at least, the ego came in the back door, and I didn't even realize it. And you start thinking, oh yeah, I am all these things, and I am great, and all this. And so I got a little prickish.
Right.
I started getting full of myself. And so to David Coverdale's credit, he tolerated it all, And so my perspective at the time was, I had a solo record out that I was kind of promoting. I liked the idea of joining Whitesnake for a couple of reasons. One was I loved that record you talked about, that big record.
Yeah.
I met David a bunch of times. I really liked him. The record was already basically done. The songs were already written and recorded, but they needed guitars. So I didn't have to go through the whole process of writing, and I liked the music on the record. I thought it was pretty good, you know. So it was a very creative process for me to hear the tracks and then say, okay, what would I do on this? Now, was I perfectly right for the band? Well, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of people that say yes, and there's people that say, well, they should have gotten a more down-to-earth rock blues kind of player. And but they got me, and I wasn't going to compromise what I wanted to do, and David didn't want me to compromise, you know. So it was a very creative process working with Mike Klink in the studio. I enjoyed that very much. Touring was a little difficult, only because, not difficult, it was actually much easier in a sense, because with Dave Roth, it was such a party, you know. There was so much momentum of things, and with Whitesnake, it was much more subdued. But the guys in Whitesnake were wonderful guys. I mean, I don't know if you've ever talked to Rudy.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, Rudy's just a gentleman. He's just so great. And Adrian is really he's very artistic. He's got a lot of classic kind of, not classical, I mean, just classic European kind of fundamental integrity, you know, artistic integrity. And that was really good. And we worked together very well on the stage. And Tommy Aldridge is he's just a funny guy, you know. He's very sarcastic, but funny, really funny. So
Yeah,
if anybody was a problem in that band, it was probably me.
Perhaps. You haven't really done a lot of band work since then. You've been mostly solo. In fact, pretty much uniquely solo. Is that better for you to not be in a band situation? Because people always say, oh, there should be like Chickenfoot with Joe Satriani, Steve needs to go do a super group. It doesn't seem to interest you. Is that right?
Steve needs to do what everybody else needs to do. Whatever the fuck he wants.
Right. Which
yeah, so that's the bottom line.
And it seems to be working out quite well. And if I can, I'll ask you just a couple more, and then because I know we're gone way over here. But you wrote "My Little Man" for the Osmosis album with Ozzy Osbourne in '95. Was that part of you trying out for the band? I mean, was Ozzy interested in you as just a songwriter, or was he interested in you as you're my next guitarist? You've done this Whitesnake, you've done the Alice Cooper, Feed My Frankenstein. You've done. I want you, or was it just, hey, let's just write a song?
Well, it was actually, it vacillated back and forth. When they first approached me, Ozzy had finished half of his record, and they were just looking to get him together with various people to write music. But so he came to my house, and we really hit it off, and we started to work, and we worked for like 3 months, and by the time we were done at my studio, we had enough material for a whole record. And him and I were kind of like plotting and planning. We thought that, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a new record. But then at the end of the day, when they hired the producer, Michael Beinhorn, and they started to look at the practicality of what the next steps were,
right.
The record company, who had already spent a tremendous amount of money, and I was going to be very expensive and all this stuff, they just made the logical choice to go back to take what they liked, to then go back to the original idea. Just take what you like and go finish this record. And that was perfect, really, because, hey, I got to work with Ozzy Osbourne for 3 months, and that was one of the funnest times of my life, you know? And I didn't have to, I love Ozzy, but can you picture me touring with him? I'll go to the concerts. I love it. I'll get on and jam, but I can't see myself playing Paranoid every night.
No. Though in 1995, it might have been interesting.
Sorry?
I said, though in 1995, at that time, that might have been sort of headline worthy or newsworthy, like, whoa, there's...
Yeah, but I had already tasted total freedom, and I had done Passion and Warfare, I'd done Flexible, I'd done Sex and Religion, I had just finished Alien Love Secrets, which was just, for me personally, just a beautiful record of just guitar music, the kind of guitar music that I love, the way that I like to play, the notes that I like to choose in the privacy of my own home. And when I did Sex and Religion, it was my attempt at putting a band together and doing that thing. And it was fun. It was great. I got to work with Devin. But when it came to the Ozzy thing, I wouldn't saying that would be a step backwards is too strong. I'd done it. I'd been with the big rock stars doing that kind of thing. And my instincts, I didn't need the money. My instinct said, no. At this point in your life, you have to you've tasted the forbidden fruit,
Right.
And you can participate in these things, these other things. And I still do. I still play on other people's records, a song here and there. So I just got one from Mike Klink to do a solo on. But it's not the thing that I feel I want to focus most of my attention on. And yeah, people say to me, "Why, Joe Satriani did Chicken Foot, so have you ever thought of?" I would never rule out that a situation might arise where I feel like there's a group of guys that warrant doing that kind of a thing. But and I get approached all the time by all sorts of bands, and most of the time, people just want to kind of relive the glory days of yore, and I'm just not there. I'm just here.
Well, we do need a 30th anniversary of Eat 'Em and Smile. We do need that, but
that would be fun. Huh?
That would be fun. Now,
I didn't even know it was 30.
Yeah, no, and I know I've gone way, way over the time. I guess I'll finish with this, with sort of on the side kind of thing. Years ago, probably 5 years ago, I saw a TV show that you were on where you were talking about bees and beekeeping out of your house in Encino, something like that? Encino. Is that something you're still doing? Is that still sort of your hobby du jour?
Well, I did it for many years, and right at this moment that you're asking me, I'm in between hives. I actually don't have any hives because unfortunately I lost them to the colony collapse situation.
Right.
And that's been happening. But I'm planning. I just had somebody set up the backyard for a different area, and I'm waiting till. I'm probably going to wait till after next year, because next year I'm going to be on tour most of the time, and maybe I'll probably. The springtime is the best time to start another hive,
right.
Another colony, but it takes about a year for them to start really producing surplus honey. So I may kick a few hives off before I start touring, but it's hard to do in the winter.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, I guess on that, I guess we'll stop. I didn't get to Frank Zappa. I didn't get to the Monster of Rock cruise, and of course, working on the Alice Cooper "Hey Stupid" album. Just being in the same room as Alice Cooper is just must be phenomenal. I mean, he probably is the nicest guy in rock. I mean, I've met him 6-7 times.
I just saw him. I went to I played Rock in Rio. First of all, I mean, I was such a huge Alice Cooper fan when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I had the lyrics to every of his albums completely memorized, and I was playing at Monsters of Rock a month or so ago. And he was there with his band Hollywood Vampires, or with the band Hollywood Vampires.
Yep.
So I went over and I said hi to him, and he's going to be in the history books, man, because he's a trooper. He is just so committed to his art, and it was a great band. I stood in the pit and I was able to watch the whole show, and actually met Johnny Depp.
Yeah, how cool is that? And listen, I mean, he's in his 60s now, getting onto the 70s, and I saw him 3 times this year. He just continually delivers the goods. I mean, there is no such thing as a bad Alice.
Isn't it?
It really is, yeah. And I certainly hope that your career lasts as long as that, because it's one of those rarefied air what he's doing. And if he phoned you tomorrow and said, "Join my band," is that one where you might have to pause for a second?
That was a little bit that would be a little bit difficult to face, because yes, I would have to sit and think, I could do this for a while, a little like a tour. How cool would that be? Oh my gosh. Matter of fact, I was talking to his manager after, and I said, hey, I got some tracks, and if Alice is ever looking, let me know. And he is, so who knows? You never know. I might be able to write some music with him or something like that. But see, something like that would be kind of interesting, but it would be more of like a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to have those in life, right? Sometimes you just got to say, it can't always be about business managers and record sales. Like you were saying before, it has to be about creativity, and sometimes it also has to be about just doing what feels good and what's fun. Right?
Well, here's the thing about Alice too: is he's an inspired musician in that his choice of melodies on the songs are brilliant. I mean, they really are melodic and they fit, and that's why he has such longevity. One of the main reasons, perhaps the main reason, and the show is second, because the songs, when you listen to all that Alice Cooper stuff, most of it's very inspired. So I love that. So if I was to work with a rock star of yore, so to speak, he's got the goods. He really has the goods.
Yeah, he really does, because you can dress up a bad song as much as you want. It's still a bad song, and the fact that Alice and the fact that Alice has been in it for 50 years, it's because of the songs. It's not the makeup. It's not it's the songs.
Yeah, you can play Generation Landslide on a flute and a timpani, and it'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Steve, a great pleasure. I could have gone on for another hour with the Zappa stuff and the Monsters of Rock cruise, but you've been more than kind today, so thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the interview. All right, buddy. Good luck.
Absolutely, and we'll do this again soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And there you have it, folks, my interview with guitarist extraordinaire Steve Vai. I certainly found that to be very, very engaging and loved it. Can you just imagine what Alice Cooper, for example, would sound like with Steve Vai in the band? Probably will never happen, but if it did, it certainly would be interesting. So there you go. On with the show, though. Let's get over to Martin Turner, formerly of Wishbone Ash. The new album is Written in the Stars. You can check out Martin at martinturnermusic.com. And well, here he is, Martin Turner. We are speaking with Martin Turner, founding member of Wishbone Ash. A great pleasure to speak with you. How are you, Martin?
How are you, Mitch? Yeah, nice to be here.
Yeah, it's one of these bands that has lasted and endured, and you've gone on and done your own thing. So let's start right there. The new album, Written in the Stars. Let's start off with the basic question. Where was the inspiration? What got you into the studio recording new music?
Well, I got back on the road about 10 years ago, and I've been playing selections from all the Wishbone albums from the 70s. Which I was quite happy to do, but a lot of people who come to see the band were asking me, isn't it about time you made some new music? so yes, that's what I've been doing the last year, and we made the album earlier this year, and finally it went out in the autumn. Written in the Stars is the main song on the album and the title of the album as well. That song, I had the music for it, and it was in danger of becoming a kind of cliched, typical rock and roll song. But I couldn't get a lyric together for it. And then one day, back in the summer, all of a sudden, I managed to get in the zone, as I call it. And the lyrics came to me in a flash. I mean, as fast as I could write them down. Maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. And that really is the theme of the album. Because I believe that on a personal level, there's a blueprint for our lives, and you've got choices you can make along the way, but it's all laid out. I was told by people when I was a teenage lad that I would be in a successful band and travel all over the world, which was utterly fantastic to me at the time because I'd never even been out of this country. But it all came to pass. Similarly, a blueprint exists for our world, our planet, our solar system, we know it's a big, long, millions of years cycle, but already, with the aid of modern technology, deep space probes, telescopes all over the place, and computerization, we know a lot of what's going to happen, and we know a lot about. We're learning all the time about the universe. It's a big subject, but all that was what I tried to express in the song, and what a wonderful place we live in, planet Earth.
Yeah, I
So
fully
there you
agree.
go.
I fully agree. Now, you've had 40 plus years of career, and you have an established fan base that expect, certain things from you. When you sit down to write a new album, are you conscious of that, or you just say, listen, I'm going to make whatever I make, and either they like it or they lump
No,
it? No, okay.
no, really, not after all these years. I mean, I've always made the music that comes naturally to me, really. I mean, obviously, we still use the harmony guitar thing, which was something that I came up with in the early 70s. I mean, I would sing melodies that were kind of along pseudo-classical lines almost, and we would transpose that to guitar, sing a harmony, and it seemed to work great, that technique. It gave the band a signature sound, as it's called nowadays. And I still do that now, really. I'm very hung up on melodic content in songs. I think if you want music, it seems to last longer if it's got melodic content in it.
I fully agree with you. I'm a big fan of hard rock and heavy metal, but unless you have that melodic content like a band like Metallica does, it's just
Yeah,
noise to me. And
yeah,
it's important.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, it really
Yeah,
is. Speaking of those bands, of a band of, like a Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, even Thin Lizzy, they have often cited Wishbone Ash and that dual, that twin lead guitar attack. Or you
that's
guys were
right.
you guys were innovators in that, and you were part of that. But as the bass player, you came out of the '60s, and the Beatles were doing their sort of four guy thing, and Elvis. It was sort of simple music, and that's I'm using the word loosely, but it was simple music.
Yeah.
Uh, as a bass player, how did you adapt to that sound? Because it was new when you started.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we were all influenced by the 60s. I started as a young lad playing about 1963, I think it was, and did a kind of 7-year apprenticeship throughout the 60s to playing covers, Beatles, Stones, American music a lot. And I think through that experience, you learn your craft. I call it an apprenticeship. I mean, it wasn't designed to be that way. But, eventually you mature to a point where you start to write your own music, your own songs. The first things that we did were pretty modest. And in fact, if I listen to them nowadays, I would probably laugh. But, you got to start somewhere. What's that Chinese proverb? Even the longest journey must start with the first step.
Of course, of course. When you started with the dual lead guitar, and I refer to it as an attack, but that wasn't the norm. Did record companies or fans say, "Hey, what are you doing? A band is just one guitarist, one bass, drums, and a lead." Was there any resistance?
Well, how can I put it? I mean, that was kind of a position that just fell into place. Really, we were a three-piece band throughout the '60s. That
Mhm.
was myself,
Right,
Steve Upton, the drummer in Wishbone Ash, and my other brother Glenn.
right.
And he quit because he found it heavy going in London. We were starving the first couple of months, before we got going. And we were looking around for guitar players, advertising. I think we auditioned everyone in London, and we weren't happy about any single guitar player. So we invited a couple of guys back. That was Andy Powell and Ted Turner. And immediately, with a brief of like, we're going to be doing harmony guitar now, which was not a totally original idea. There were a few bands that were hinting at that. The early Fleetwood Mac, I think. There was a band called Blossom Toes with Jim Cregan. They were only around for 10 minutes, but people were hinting at that idea. I think with Wishbone Ash, because, as I say, we were writing the melodies vocally, then it's not what you would tend to construct on a guitar. It's probably got, again, more melodic content.
Right.
But that was the sound that gave us a distinct identity. And in fact, you mentioned Thin Lizzy earlier.
Right.
I mean, those guys told me that they used to come along to our gigs and stand in the front and watch everything we were doing. And then, one night they walked away from the show, and apparently Phil Lynott said to them, "That's the sound we've got to get."
Yeah,
and
that's the story.
They actually had a lot more commercial success, say, than Wishbone Ash did with that style. Iron Maiden, again, I met one of the guys the other day at one of our shows, and he was quite emotional about it all. So yeah, it's nice to know that you've influenced people and helped them on their way.
Yeah, and it's also become sort of a British thing or a UK thing. When you mentioned Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, and Thin Lizzy and Def Leppard, and all these bands are doing it. American bands, for the most part, when you look at whatever Kiss, Cheap Trick, they're not. So it sort of became a UK signature kind of sound, which is remarkable. You were the leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I think say to compare each side of the Atlantic, I mean, there was a very strong tradition in the UK, in Britain, and Europe generally, I think, of folk music and also classical music. I certainly grew up on that kind of stuff, and I sang in a church choir when I was a lad. So that really gets into you. It really gets, you absorb it. In America, I mean, I think jazz and blues were far more of a basic influence, with people growing up playing music.
Yeah, fair enough. The Chuck Berrys, certainly imitators, had a long... Argus, Through the Looking Glass, in 2008, you went back and you revisited the classic Argus album.
Why did we do that?
Well, no, not why. No, I'm not going to ask you why. I'm going to ask you, why is it so? What is so special about that album that, in a sense, you sort of paid respect to it? Why is that so defining?
The original Argus album. I mean, I'm well qualified to speak about it, really, because I wrote most of the songs. They were big themes, that had been in my head for a long time. Time, generally, which is, one of the kind of constraints of the medium in which we live, time and space. Sometime time was, I was dealing with that. Sometime it tries to touch on more than one life, reincarnation. Then we get into The Warrior, which really was my attempt to examine what it is about young men, full of this kind of crazy energy, maybe frustrated sexual energy, I don't know, but they throughout history, that energy has been harnessed by warmongers, who get all these young guys to go and fight for them. And I was trying to explore that in that song. And then when I finished it, being a Libran and having to have some balance to things, I was thinking, wait a minute, people are going to think that I'm advocating this war, warrior. So I immediately wanted to write a song that counterbalanced that, which was a song deriding the destruction of war and hoping for peace, and that was Throw Down the Sword. The two songs go together like hand in glove. The King Will Come. Again, that's a religious theme, pretty much straight out of the Bible, and a Muslim book, The Prophet, I think it was called, by Khalil Gibran. Right. That's where the influence for that song came, and it's a fairly orthodox Christian idea, that when the world is kind of destroying itself, that a savior will come. An interesting concept. I'm not saying that I totally subscribe to that, believe it. I'm just putting it forward as an idea for a song. And altogether on the album, there was quite a lot of serious themes. Then when we recorded a song called Blowing Free, which we had tried to record on a couple of previous occasions, and I couldn't get it to work. So you can hear on the Argus album, the version that's there is got this ferocious bass line pushing it along like an engine. Yep. Because, I'm absolutely determined this song is going to work this time. And it did. And then it was a love song, about a girl that I met in the 60s. I had the lyric and the musical idea before Wishbone Ash existed. But when I walked into the control room one day in the studio, producer said to me, "No, we've been talking about Blown Free, and we feel that maybe it doesn't belong on this album." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right.
I had steam coming out of my ears, and I was like, "No way, it's going on the album." But all the other material is serious, and this is joyful and up, and it's different. So yeah, that's exactly why it needs to be on the album, to act as a counterbalance for the seriousness of some of the other tunes. But one thing's for sure, the Argus album was a big success. I mean, it was album of the year over here in Europe. Yep. And it's, many people over the years have written to me about it, said what an inspiration it was. It had to get them through exams, when they were freaked out, stuff like this. And it is sold, constantly ever since 1972. So, and when we go out and play those songs now, all these years later, they still sound fresh and new, which is unusual for music from that period, because it usually dates, it sounds dated. So I'm very happy with it in that respect.
Yeah, and when you revisited it in 2008, you sit down, you actually play the whole album. Do you sit there with a sense of pride, like, wow, this was great? Or do you go, oof, we should have fixed that, we should have done this needed a bit more bass, that needed a different, like, do you become critical of it?
To be honest, it came about by accident, really. I wanted my band to perform the whole of the Argus album live, right, which the original band never did. We recorded, or we played live most of it, but not all of it. So I wanted to do that whole album, and we were actually rehearsing at my manager's studio to make sure that we could actually nail these songs, put them together, and it was sounding good. And my manager said, "Hey, you're in a recording studio, let's record this." Why? What for? It's, well, if it sounds good, maybe it could go out. So really, it was an exercise in the difference between then and now. The technology in those days was very, very different. So, we had a lot on our side there, I think. And, it's a very different sound nowadays. So we recorded it, didn't know what to do with it. But we finished it. It was recorded in about the same time as the original one was. And it was, everyone was keen to put it out. I really wasn't sure about it. I mean, it's very difficult to do that, to revisit a classic album. You can't really change it because people know it and love it. So we stayed pretty close to the original, I think.
Right.
And it was called Through the Looking Glass because the looking glass is actually an old expression for a mirror. Right. So it's a reflection. Right. And I did ask the guy who wrote Alice Through the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland. He's, Lewis Carroll was his name as a writer. He's actually called something like George Dodgson, and he was buried in a grave that was right next to my house on the hill. So I was walking by there one day, and I asked him if I could use that lick, and I got the feeling that he was cool with it. So it was called Argus Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah, and listen, it turned out great. Let me come back to Written in the Stars for a second.
Sure.
Here you are, 40 plus years later. You can go out and play Argus full. Fans are going to show up. You put on Martin Turner's Wishbone Ash on the marquee. Fans are going to show up. There's no need to make a new album, right? I mean, it's sort of a bonus for the fans. What motivates you to actually sit down? Because I mean, it is a bit, it's a pain in the tuchus to write and
Well,
record
no, I
and
mean, although, over the years I've certainly done a lot of gigs and a lot of touring.
right,
I'm still very much a studio man. Always have been right from the '70s. Very, very into recording and the process of recording, and engineering, producing, you name it. And I've got fairly strong ideas about how things should sound. So with my band, most of whom have been with me for years, I must confess that I thought of them primarily as performers.
right,
And when we talked about the idea of putting a new album together, some new music, I wasn't sure, to be honest, how it was going to pan out. I had a few songs and a few ideas, so we embarked on it, and I was absolutely amazed at the guys in my band, Tim, the drummer, Danny, the guitar player in particular, how creative guys they were. I'd never seen that side of them really. So it's that I think helped to generate and inspire the whole process. It was great. It was a really pleasant surprise, and obviously, having made a start now, we're keen to do some more.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess once you're an artist, that urge just never leaves you. You're just never not an artist, right? It's in you.
That's right. I mean, I can be a bit lazy at times. I can not play my instrument, not want to go out on the road, because I'm busy, interested in other stuff. But always, I come back to it. And, when you've been away from recording for a while or playing live for a while, you come back with a freshness and full of ideas and enthusiasm. And, like I say, especially in the studio, which is long, hard graft. There's no two ways about it.
Right.
It's great fun, but you burn up a serious amount of energy. I mean, for me, it generally takes 9 months to put an album together. From its inception to its finish.
Right.
I kind of think of it almost like a male pregnancy.
Right.
It's my baby, and I stay with it until it's up and running.
Yeah, and that was sort of the point I was making before: is why go through this 9 months gestation period when all you have to do is call up whatever clubs and say, "Let's put my name on the marquee and let's go do a show Friday night," right? I mean, it's
Well, both things work in tandem. If you're out playing live music, then you want to keep it fresh. You want to introduce new things to it. And for me, as I've said twice already, working in the studio is such a creative buzz. Right. It really is. That's where your creativity really comes alive and soars. And you get a great buzz from that. There's no two ways about it.
Absolutely. Now, I know they gave us 20 minutes, so I'll finish with this. You've toured and gone out as Martin Turner's Wishbone Ash. How important is the brand? People always say we're a band, but really we're a brand, right?
Well, yeah, that's a business expression that is used a lot nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a bloody businessman. To me, it's a band. Obviously, there is the official Wishbone Ash, Andy Powell, one of the guys who was an original guitar player. But brand, band, whatever you want to call it. I mean, obviously, if I'm going out and playing Wishbone Ash music, most of the songs that I'm playing, I wrote or was involved in.
Right.
Then you got to tell people what they're paying to come and see. So Wishbone Ash has to be there in some way or other.
Yeah, fair enough. Martin, great pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, Mitch. Yeah, really nice to talk to you.
Absolutely. And we'll do it again sometime.
Okay, lovely.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. And there you have it, folks. My interview with former Wishbone Ash member Martin Turner. Head over to martinturnermusic.com for more. The new album is Written in the Stars. I would like to thank Martin and Steve Vai for being on the show today. Steve, of course, doing the Tony MacAlpine benefit, and raising the specter of perhaps playing with Alice Cooper someday. Wouldn't that be fun? There you go. Find me on Twitter at Mitch Lafon. There is also a one-on-one with Mitch Twitter account. There is the one-on-one with Mitch Facebook page. And again, if you would like to offer a small contribution to the show, I have a PayPal account. It is mitchminute@aol.com. That is mitchminute@aol.com. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Mark Striegel at Talking Metal for making this possible every week. He does carry the show through the talkingmetal.com website and then is kind, courteous, and nice enough to throw it up on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and all that stuff for me. He does, if you want, the infrastructure of the show, and so I have to thank him for that. Also, lots of news coming out these days. Guns N' Roses reunion potentially. Heavy Montreal is, I guess, starting to think about bands. The summer season for touring in 2016 is starting to get underway. Rumors and agitations and other things are coming through the pipeline, and it looks as though 2016 will be a very, very fun concert year, especially for some of us who are, no longer 35. There seems to be a lot of classic heritage rock coming our way, so there you go. Again, thanks for listening, and bye for now.